sometimes arriving in a new place comes with a privilege, which is that in your eagerness to know what's in that place, you actually get to learn things that for the local could go unnoticed. And that happened to me. I moved to Amherst about a year ago, and soon after, I learned that this area is teeming with a vibrant underground culture of toilet activists. These are people who advocate for alternative sanitation solutions, such as composting toilets, which use no water and recycle the contents into fertile soil. And this type of activism deeply resonated with me because back in the 1990s, I was engaged in my own toilet activism. I was working in South America as a young architect on alternative solutions to sanitation issues that affect rural populations. Roughly half of the population of the developing world suffers from waterborne diseases, which are transmitted through deficient sanitation infrastructure. And these are diseases that claim millions of lives every year, 4,000 children every day. And death, comparatively speaking, is nothing when you look at the suffering that a person undergoes before dying. And I happen to know, not because I died, but I did contract, while I was doing this type of work, typhoid fever. And I do still remember, despite that was so long ago, the headache. It was so excruciatingly painful. It was the mother of all headaches. But there was also the chills, the fevers, the lethargy, the difficulty to breathe. I remember that happened on a Sunday. I was working on construction. It was actually my first building. And I was living on site. So the workers would leave on Friday to go back the next Monday. So I was by myself. And I started to experience these symptoms by noon. And very quickly, it happens very fast. So by mid-afternoon, I felt this tremendous necessity to breathe. I couldn't keep the pace, so I was looking for breeze, and almost instinctively, I climbed to the highest point in the structure, and there I passed out, and I woke up a few hours later, and I look around to find ants surrounding me, and I thought, this is it. I'm dying. They're here for me. I learned a lot during those years of hardcore activism, yet there was something that I couldn't quite figure out, which was the reaction of people when they heard about what I was doing. There were two main reactions. One was laughter, and the other one was fear. And I couldn't understand laughter, but fear remained a mystery. And it was fear as in the person backing up, opening big eyes, and then proceeding to inform me that I should know that I was engaging in something that was not morally correct, that I was in defiance of some unmentioned yet agreed upon spiritual conventions that demand deep hygiene and cleanliness. Once I worked for an architect, and I there proposing a composting toilet for his project, and he lectured me, quoting some dark religious dictums. He said in those terms, what man, he used man, what man dumps, because he dumps it, he doesn't produce it, is to be left there, and you shouldn't even dare looking at that. That type of fear is something that my own students, I teach a class called Reinventing the Toilet. Guess where? Hampshire College, the only place where you can devote a whole semester about toilets and be paid and get students. And get students who are so passionate that they were doing things that I cannot legally mention. But I can mention how some of them decided that in order to trigger conversation about the topic, it would be a good idea to show up with portable composting toilets in public spaces such as libraries. And one of the students wrote in her report that she had run into a self-described compost queen who ran away in terror when the student asked her, "And how about composting your poop?" Fear is the big question. Why such fear? And the situation is that, in fact, is understandable. If you look at the history of sanitation, it has a long chapter of disease. And this is disease that at some point threatened to erase Western culture by decimating entire populations in Europe. But what was more traumatic was that nobody really knew what was that thing that was killing people. All they knew was what they saw, people dying horribly with terrible headaches, difficulty to breathe, sweaty, feverish, out of their minds. Symptoms that were just like the ones that I experienced back in the day in South America. Yet, centuries ago, these symptoms could be easily confused for possession by the devil. And the assumption was you must have done something very bad to invite the devil. And for that, you deserve to be punished, or you deserve to go through horrific procedures, or perhaps even you should be left to die. Only by the mid-1800s, we in the Western Hemisphere figured out that what was transmitting these diseases at large scale was feces-contaminated water. And once we figured that out, everybody wanted to do away with their feces as quickly and as far away as possible. But the technological device that was developed for that operation was a very peculiar one, because you would assume if the problem is that water is what's transmitting the disease, then the solution would be separating water from feces, right? Yet the solution was to use even more water to get rid of the feces. That's what the flush toilet does. Paradoxically enough, by the same time, and I'm talking about the second half of the 1800s, we had already devised a solution, and brilliant inventions, composting toilet designs and disposal systems had been developed and were used and were working. However, in the frenzy, after the discovery of the link between disease and hygiene, policymakers flagged composting as yet one of those practices that had to be eliminated, along with other practices that were very disgusting, like in the morning just throwing your stuff out in the streets and things like that. The discovery of that link led to a whole new world, a whole new way to understand the world, one that would celebrate hygiene. Hygiene as a way of life. Hygienism, or an excessive use of hygiene, was seen as a necessity, since it would keep us from disease, the devil, and death. That word that celebrates hygiene has a name, and that's the modern word. The modern that consecrated the building environment to the celebration of hygiene. That's what modern architecture does. Walls that are painted white, buildings that should have enough light, lots of light indeed, and what the modernist architects call pure volumes, which is cubical structures. And, of course, we still have that monument to the modernist, hygienist aesthetic, and that is our own bathroom. It's light, full of lights, illuminated, clean, immaculate. So you can begin to see some of the connections that explain the fear. On the one hand, there is a residual historical association that says that if you refuse to use water to do away with your waste, the devil can come and get to you and who knows who else. But on the other hand, there is the notion that if you adopt composting toilets, you are ditching a historical achievement and that monument to progress as the flush toilet is. So the fear comes from a historical trauma. Yet this is the moment to overcome trauma and move on. Because in conquering our fear, we made a historical mistake, partly due to the 1 century use of flush toilets. An important fraction of the 1% of water that is available remains safe for human consumption. And the water scarcity is starting to become apparent. Wars over water are for now very localized, but they are proving to be just as vicious or perhaps even more than wars for oil. Thus, seen in a larger context, this justifies the work by Western mass toilet activists. So, if you ever run into one of them, do overcome your fear and consider letting them know that you appreciate what they do. Furthermore, even consider yourself becoming part of that effort. Thank you very much.
In the morning, in the backyard, a chair to wonder how life got so small. Could this be all there is? Through the screen door, cups and saucers, chirping like birds, well, she'll be okay. I can get away for a while. Something's gnawing, it's always nagging. I gotta do something before it's too late.